We're not going to leave here trying harder. We're going to leave here trusting more, aren't we? There's no try harder. There's just trusting more. Everything God does, He does for the display of His glory. God loves to reveal who He is. He loves to display His glory. And so for us to live for the glory of God means that we tell the truth about who God is at all times. Our lives are to be a revelation of the truth about who God is. And so whether we realize it or not, we are either living God-glorifying, Christ-honoring, making much of Jesus' lives, or we don't. There's no gray area. Is my life God-glorifying? Is it Christ-honoring? Do I make much of Jesus? Because that's why He created us. Genesis 1:27 tells us, so God created man in His own image. He created him in the image of God. He created them male and female. But in Genesis 3, the image is marred. Sin and death have entered the world, and grief has arrived. I really believe that sometimes the reason we as believers have such a hard time dealing with grief and death is because we, of all people, understand it's not supposed to be this way. It wasn't supposed to be this way. But the beauty of grace is this: God takes us from grief to glory by restoring His image in us. I had never understood or heard anyone say, I want to glorify God in this hard place, until I heard Cindy Guerin say it when Chad went to be with the Lord. And she said it for an entire newscast when they came to interview her. And she said, all I know is to God be the glory. And I started at that moment to long for that kind of faith that wanted to live for the glory of God. And what does that look like? God takes us from grief to glory by restoring His image in us. That's how it glorifies God for His image to be restored in us. God made us in His image, and He wants us back. And so the Christian life, living in the kingdom, is a restoration of Jesus taking this upside-down world and making it right side up and showing us what it looks like to live in the kingdom as kingdom people. We witness to the world what it looks like to live as a child of the King and as a citizen of the kingdom. He takes us from grief to glory by restoring His image in us. Romans 8:29 says, for those God foreknew, He also predestined to be conformed to the likeness of His Son. Why do people have problems with predestination when all it is I'm going to make you look like Jesus? I want you to look like Jesus. I want to restore the image of my Son in you and in me. In 1 John 3:2, it says, dear friends, we are God's children now, and what we will be has not yet been revealed. We know that when He appears, we will be like Him because we will see Him as He is. And everyone who has this hope in Him purifies himself just as He is pure. If Jesus has gone to prepare a place for me, then I want Him to prepare me for the place. That's what we're doing. That's what He's doing when He's restoring His image in us. Romans 8:17 says, now if we are children, then we are heirs, heirs of God and co-heirs with Christ, if indeed we share in His sufferings, in order that we may also share in His glory. It is in our sufferings that we reveal the glory of who God is. God takes us from grief to glory by giving us the covenant of recompense. He takes us from grief to glory by giving us the covenant of recompense. In Ruth chapter 2, verses 11 through 12, Boaz says this, I've been told all about what you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband, how you left your father and mother and your homeland and came to live with a people you did not know before. May the Lord repay you or recompense you for what you have done. May you be richly rewarded by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge. Boaz is speaking to Ruth about the God of covenant, Jehovah Gamallah, the God who compensates or recompenses loss. Our losses qualify us for recompense, and Ruth had experienced 4 major losses. She'd had the death of her husband, and so that was loss of provision and companionship. She had left her mother and father to go with Naomi. That was the loss of protection. She had left her homeland. That was the loss of identity. And she was dwelling with strangers. She had the loss of the familiar. 4 major losses. And Boaz comes to her, the kinsman redeemer, and he tells her, Jehovah will recompense you. He will make it up to you. Recompense begins when we place ourselves completely under his care. Hebrews 11:6 says, and without faith it is impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. And so as we submit ourselves to be completely under his care, then God can begin his covenant of recompense in us. He can begin to restore us to his image. We are promised recompense. It is something God wants to do for us. It's something he desires to do for us. In 2 Corinthians 4:16 through 18, it says, therefore we do not lose heart. Though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we're being renewed day by day. For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. That's the recompense. This is what our losses are doing for us, is they're achieving for us an eternal glory that cannot be taken away. For what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal. So every death, every loss is a reminder that we are living in the not yet. But it will not always be so. It won't always be like this. I love Revelation 21:23 to 25. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and he will dwell with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them, and he will be their God. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. Did you know that the wiping the tears from your eyes is something that Jesus has reserved for himself? He won't let anybody else do it. It's something he wants to do. There will be no more death. There'll be no more mourning. There'll be no more crying. There'll be no more pain, for the old order of things has passed away. And he who is seated on the throne said, I am making everything new. I'm making everything new. I love what Timothy Keller said. Everything sad is going to come untrue, and it will somehow be greater for having once been broken and lost. Every sad thing will no longer be true. We will never, ever remember being sad. We'll never, ever remember grieving. We will never, ever remember loss. We will never, ever remember the pain. All we will know is the eternal glory of God over and over and over. I truly believe this, that just when we think we have discovered everything we can possibly know about God and who He is and His glory and the splendor and the majesty of heaven, just at that moment when we think it couldn't possibly get any better, God's going to go, watch this. And it will. And for all eternity, that's what He's going to do over and over again. Dazzle us with who He is. So, folks, it's worth the wait. And it also means that we have a tremendous, wonderful privilege to invite people into that. And we can invite them in by displaying to them that whatever has happened to us has not robbed us of the joy and the hope and the certainty that for all eternity He is going to reveal to us over and over and over the weight of glory. We won't remember this. All we'll see is Jesus, and He will be enough. And I truly believe we'll be standing arm in arm with those that went before us and enjoying Jesus. I love it that there are those that we have lost. They have earned the privilege of coming back with Him. They've earned that privilege. They are given that privilege. And so what do we do while we wait? How do we wait with deliberate intention and purpose? And I believe the answer is found in Jeremiah 29. The Lord had the prophet write a letter to the exiles from Jerusalem who'd been carried away in exile to Babylon. The letter instructed the exiles to build houses and settle down, plant gardens and eat what they produce, marry and have sons and daughters. Also seek the peace and prosperity of the city to which I've carried you into exile. And believe me, I know that loss and grief feel a whole lot like exile. But what we need to remember, because we're in a place we never asked to be. That's what exiles are, is we're in a place we never asked to be. But it is in this place that God makes this promise to us. Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you a hope and a future. That's what we do while we wait. We live in such a way that we entice others to come with us. Not long after Frank died, a woman came to me who had been friends with him for years. And she told me a story about him I had never heard before. And what she did was she said, Andrea, one day I asked Frank, what is the secret of your boldness? Why is it that you so freely invite people to know Christ? You have such boldness. You just tell everybody about Jesus. And she said, I'll never forget his answer. And he asked her, he said, have you ever been invited to a barbecue? And it was really, really good barbecue. And the food was delicious. And the host was so happy you were there. And he made you feel welcome. And he made you feel like you belonged. And you went to the person who invited you and you told them, thanks for inviting me. He said, when I get to heaven, I just want there to be a lot of people who say, thanks for inviting me. And that's what we get to do. We get to invite people into the hope and the joy and the salvation and the restoration and everything that God has for us. We get to invite people into that. And when they see us going through that hard place, and yet we continue to invite them in to this glorious, wonderful relationship with Jesus Christ, they know it's real. They know it's real. Romans 8:6 tells us that our minds are either set on death or life. We're either thinking about dying or we're thinking about living. We're thinking about those things that bring death, such as despair, hopelessness, anger, bitterness, or we set our minds on life, joy, peace, love, kindness. Deuteronomy 30, verses 19 through 20 tells us, now choose life so that you and your children may live and that you may love the Lord your God. Listen to his voice. Hold fast to him, for the Lord is your life. Nothing else gives life but Jesus. His words to Mary and Martha was, I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he should die, yet will he live. There's no life in wishing things were different. There's no life in clinging to the past. There's only life in Jesus himself. And our response to our suffering will demonstrate the value we place on God's glory. Our response to our suffering will demonstrate the value we place on God's glory. How much value will you place on the glory of God today? It is my prayer that you will choose well.